Hello and welcome to the inside of my motorhome, and today I'm going to be talking about languages. People often ask me how is it that I managed to learn so many languages, and the answer is, unfortunately, I don't know. A friend said to me, asked me if I wanted to join this polyglot organisation, and I said I'm not a polyglot, and he said, well, anybody who knows even half of what you know is a polyglot. And I've never actually taken a great interest in languages. It's not something, when people ask me what I'm interested in, I'll say, okay, I'm interested in history, I'm interested in wildlife, I'm interested in travel, motorhomes, but languages isn't among them. I've only seen languages as being something which I've learned to do because of necessity, but not because I particularly like them. Now, at university, I studied linguistics. I really would, if I could have chosen, I'd have done history, but when I was at university, there was no application for history whatsoever. Now, when I was at school, from the age of around 11, French was obligatory, but I stopped doing it when I was 14. And also I did what's called an O-level, which is something you do at age 16 in the UK, or did. And I've got an O-level in Latin, for example. Not that it really has been any use to me since then. Occasionally I can go into a church and I can read medieval Latin or something like that, but not that's any use to me whatsoever. I started learning French after leaving school, and I did this because I was in the Museum of Mankind in London. I was 19 years old, and there was this lady. Then I started talking to her, and she said to me, I am French, I cannot speak English. And so that was right. So I'm going to learn another language. So that's how I actually started off. Now at university, within the linguistics which I studied, I did French and Spanish, and since then I can now go just about anywhere I want in Europe. I said just about, and I can actually communicate with people in their own language. There's lots of languages there, of course, that I don't theoretically speak. But for example, to use one example, I can understand Romanian. I had a document, for example, written in from Moldova, and there was only one word I didn't understand in a 4-page document. Knowing, for example, Slavonic languages are very similar, so with knowledge of Russian and Polish, and then just go anywhere. And obviously I can't speak Czech, but I have absolutely no problem in making myself understood whatsoever. For example, if you can see my films from Austerlitz, I did a series there. And when I was talking to people there, I was speaking to them in Polish or Russian, depending on what I felt like, and they'd speak back to me in Czech, and there were no problems whatsoever. I have had problems with older people because they can't clearly understand what I'm trying to say, or think I'm from the other part of the country and I'm a bit weird or something like that. But that is how it works out. Now, coming back to the question, how can you learn lots of languages? Well, the one thing I did understand is the following, is that you need to learn to be able to think in the language. And any teaching methodology that stops you thinking in the language is, I don't think is going to work at all. So you do this, when I ran a language school in London, and in the 90s. And what methodology which I actually wrote was the following, is that you try and get people to understand certain structures, or what we often call grammar, but you don't obviously present it as that, and then to try and get people to respond in a super quick manner, in a manner which you would do in normal conversation. And if you can get people then to start using greater and greater amounts of information and to respond quickly to it, then that is a way of learning. Now, another problem is, of course, is vocabulary, and as you get older, it gets harder and harder to learn things. And now, when I was again in my 20s, and I was I was in France and trying to learn French, and I could then learn between 30 and 50 words a day. And now, if I try and learn between 3 and 5, sometimes when I'm, for example, in the metro in Moscow or something like that, and I'll try and learn some, and I would have like 10 new words out or something. And as soon as I got out the metro and I try and remind myself what those words were, I'd forgotten them completely. There's a friend of mine, Uncle Davey, Usenet Post. You can see his channel on YouTube. YouTube. He has done a Russian course, and he's absolutely brilliant with this, because not only can he do the accent, which I can't do, because everything that I speak, I've got a Newcastle accent. But he's got lots and lots of languages, so he's absolutely really brilliant on this, and I wish I could do the same. I've heard of things, people saying, well, why don't you get yourself a girlfriend or something? I've often heard people say this, but it doesn't really work out that way, because if you're in a relationship with somebody, you want to be able to explain to them what you're thinking, what you're doing, what's in your mind. And I found being frustrated at this. I've been with women and I couldn't really say necessarily what I wanted to say. So as far as I'm concerned now, I remember thinking, having been with someone from Latin America, that really you've got to be with somebody from your own culture to be able to do it, to be able to speak to them in English. Well, and I've got to, maybe it's got to the stage now in my life I found out that is not necessarily the true. It's not necessarily true. Certainly of my more recent partners, none of them actually, or a few of them should say, actually spoke English. So it's not absolutely essential, but you've got to be in a state where you're actually now thinking within completely within the language. I don't mean thinking when you're talking, as obviously I'm thinking now in English, but when you think, you're in the street and you're walking, or if you talk to yourself, you say something to yourself, or obviously I talk to the dog in the local language, or above all, when you start to dream in a foreign language, and then you know it. It has occurred to me in the past that what would happen if I had a stroke. For example, I once met a lady on the metro in Paris, and she told me that once she'd been able to speak French, but after a stroke, she had so much difficulty in learning English again that she wasn't able to learn French a second time. So it occurred to me, well, if I had a stroke and I ended up in some other country, and then I was unable to speak English again. Another thing I'd like to mention is the confusion which happens between languages, languages you don't use for a long time, and you can forget languages. This is absolutely the case. You know, I was in Portugal 30 years ago, 1987, and I could speak Portuguese quite well. The thing is, I've lost it now. I haven't been to Portugal. I haven't used it unless I haven't read anything, I haven't watched anything, done nothing. And I really believe, I've been saying to myself now for 25 years, I've got to go back to Portugal, just to, if it's only just to practice a little bit. Now, what I did as far as Portuguese was concerned, I took an easier option, because the differences between Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese from Brazil is there's even grammatical differences and structural differences and pronunciation differences, and I took the Brazilian option. I've never been to Brazil, I've got no intention of going there, but I learned the Brazilian Portuguese because it was much easier. Now, another thing which I think I've got used to now, but in many languages, you possibly know some German, you've got these declensions, but certainly very much so in Slavonic languages. You've got 7 declensions, maybe 8, depends on the way you look at it. And learning to say things in the correct genitive, dative, or whatever declension, it seems extremely daunting, but after a while I think you get used to it. But I know I make mistakes all the time. I put things in the nominative when it's supposed to be in another form. But usually I realise as soon as I've said it, and then I'll correct myself. But I've noticed that people around me tend to understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, good, right, so I've given some ideas then, because the title of this film I think is going to be, I haven't decided yet, but I think it'll be How I Learnt a Lot of Languages, and the answer is I don't know. So not much of an answer really, is it? So if you're feeling conned, then you won't be wanting to subscribe to me or hear anything else I'm going to do on languages, which, to be quite honest, I don't think I'll do anyway.